everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors, number 87. This is a series I've been inspired and guided to do thanks to my energetic connection with Kata Judah. Kata Judah is our beautiful sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our sacred feminine site. In fact, they're only about 40 miles apart, 60k, about a 40-minute drive, so very close together. What I'm here to do is to give a platform to our men so they can share their journey into the heart, their highs, their lows, tools, practices, insights, or wisdom. What have they picked up along the way that they can now share with the other men walking this path, and of course us women who are walking right there by their sides. Today's guest is a man called David Lawson, and he also goes by the name of Awake Warrior. Now, David is a high-performance men's coach, and he also does retreats. He sees the transformation as coming from unleashing creativity, productivity, and clarity to help us win life using powerful, time-tested techniques for the modern working warrior. So really excited to chat to David today and find out what these techniques are and hearing all about his journey into the heart. Enjoy. David Lawson, welcome to Heart Warriors. How are you today?
I'm excellent. How are you, Kim?
Yeah.
Gemma, right?
Gemma, yeah. Very well, thank you. Where about in the world are you?
I'm just west of Toronto, Canada.
Oh, nice one. Awesome. Okay, let's start. So I like to get to know a bit about the man inside. So when you drop all your labels, who is David Lawson?
I asked myself that question. One of the questions we were taught when I first started to study meditation is, who am I? And you may not have the answer to that question right away, but the more you ask yourself that, you start to get the answer from the universe. And when I asked myself that over time, I found that who am I? I'm really just a soul inside this physical body. And what's that saying? We're all spiritual beings having a physical body experience. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you for that. So
You're
let's
welcome.
see what shaped you into being the warrior that you are today. So, little David, what was happening in his life? What was the main circumstance that shaped you into becoming the man you are today?
Probably something fairly traumatic. So when I was 15 years old, my father was driving me onto a hockey game. I was playing competitive hockey here in Canada. Hockey is one of the big sports, and I was in love with hockey. But anyway, my dad had suffered a massive heart attack while driving me to just around the corner from our house and fell on my lap, and he died of a massive heart attack. And it's funny, at 15 years old, I wasn't really around a lot of death, but at that moment, I could feel his body just sort of energetically just leave his physical being. I ran and knocked on a neighbor's door. An ambulance came, but I knew in my heart, in my gut or intuition, that he was gone. Um, so I think that happening at such a young age, at first it was shock, but then you really start to go inside and start to question life, and at a younger age, and start seeking answers to why we're here and why we go, and that sort of thing. I think it led me down a path of really wanting to know more about sort of the spiritual side of life, and when you die, where you go, what happens, that sort of thing. And at first, I think through my 20s and 30s, I wasn't really there, but as I started to get older, a lot of that in introspection started to really come out. And then through my own sort of suffering, I went through a lot of I guess at that age, as men, we were taught to suppress our emotions, especially as a hockey player. We're taught, suck it up, don't cry, be a man. So I didn't really grieve my father's death properly. And I think as I got older, I pushed it down with a lot of bad habits. And when that started not to work anymore, and I started getting unhealthy physically and mentally, it led me down a real path of healing, and which led me down to a lot of embodiment practices like meditation and breath work and qigong that helped shape me who I am today, which is a lot more healthier, more into present moment awareness and not looking outside of myself for happiness.
Yeah, amazing. So we'll break down this journey. So that 15-year-old boy, where did he start looking for answers regarding death?
It led me to a lot of reading for some reason. I was very curious about other people's lives, so I started reading a lot of autobiographies and such, and people have become successful for whatever reason. I really was interested in other people's stories and how different traumas and things affected their lives, and how I could sort of you know have a framework for my own life.
Yeah. So from what I understood, you were searching for answers as to what happens after death, like, that opened up that realm for you. Is that correct?
So a little bit, yeah, I would say. And then, I grew up in a Christian family, so we were taught, the heaven and the hell thing. But as I got older, and I ended up in California one day at a spiritual bookshop, and I ran into a book picked up a book by fluke by Dr. Brian Weiss, which was Many Lies, Many Masters, I think it was called. And at their meditation retreat I was at, there happened to be a speaker there from Stanford University who was doing a talk on remote viewing. He's written a book on, I think it's Dr. Russell something. Anyway, he was there. And then there was another speaker that started talking about past life regression. And he showed, kids that were 4 or 5 years old that could speak like 8 languages, and they never had a session in, other languages other than their mother tongue. And then, another 12-year-old that could play, piano like Beethoven, things like that. So it was, all of a sudden it was like, there was no explanation for that. So I started to really think, maybe we do reincarnate, and that led to all sorts of different ways of thinking, I suppose.
Yeah. And you also said that as a 15-year-old boy, you felt you weren't allowed to express that grief. So what did he do instead of expressing the grief? How did he cope with that?
I think it was that training of that masculine identity back then was, like I said, like, suck it up and be a man and keep your chin up and keep moving forward. And that analogy for me was like, oh, okay, I got knocked down, I'm going to get back up again. And that served me well, because it was like, I said, oh, this is just some adversity like all these other people I learned had. But grief is a powerful emotion, and I've learned since then that these emotions that we store in our body, they don't, unless you process them, they eventually come up physically, in terms of, they manifest into tons of different things, like disease. For me, it was a lot of anxiety, some insomnia. If you don't deal with these emotions, Gemma, I find eventually they catch up to you. So at the time, it served me well to just keep moving forward. I became a successful businessman and kept playing hockey, had a hockey scholarship. But looking back, knowing what I know now, I probably would have handled things a whole lot differently and spent less time on that mentality of, keep moving forward and be a man. I would have spent more time processing that emotion, and maybe taking a time out from hockey and even business, and doing a lot more work on myself. To be, I think, a happy present man. In this interview, we're talking about men, I suppose. It takes work, at least in my experience. I'm surrounded by a lot of other men that I see that are just kind of coping. If you really want to be happy and present, have a successful, marriage and relationships with friends, and even relationship with yourself, I find, at least for me, and I know others, it takes a lot of work. You have to sit and spend time less doing and more being. And back then, I did the exact opposite.
Can you remember a point there where you actually sat down and how old were you when you actually gave yourself permission to grieve?
That took a long time. My mom got ill about 7 years ago, and one of my good friends is a PhD in social work, and she suggested I take a course with this woman that was teaching others how to grieve, and I did. And she said to me, David, do you spend any time in quiet? And I said, well, yeah, of course. I have I do breath work and I meditate for about at least an hour a day. And she says, no, I mean, do you really spend time in quiet? I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, do you check in and ask yourself, how are you feeling? And I said, well, no, no one's ever taught me that. She suggested after I do my meditation work in the morning and practice and the breath work to just check in and ask, how are you feeling right now? And when I did that during the time I was caregiving for my mom, all sorts of grief came up in waves. Like I cried more during that year of caregiving for my mom than I probably did in my entire life. And
Wow.
that wasn't that long ago. That was 7 or 8 years ago. So that's when I really started to learn how to cry as a man. It was, I think, as men, if we don't check in and ask ourselves how we're feeling, I mean, really, that it's not that complicated to process an emotion. That's really all you have to do. It takes 5-10 minutes a day, and work through that. And that's how I started to process that grief. So grief came up for my mom and my dad really at the same time.
Wow, that's so powerful, that process. David, can you please speak to men who can identify with your journey and are thinking back, yeah, maybe I didn't allow myself, the time and the space to grieve, a certain death or
Yeah,
situation. Can you speak to them and guide them? And what would you say to those men?
yeah, like my story is one of sudden death, but I was listening to someone the other day talking about trauma healing, how trauma is more stored in the body, and she was saying, all of us have trauma. Like it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, or you grew up in a perfect family, you've had some trauma. I mean, just this COVID thing was traumatic for a lot of people. Being stuck at home, many people lost their jobs. Not being able to see older loved ones in homes. That's traumatic in itself. But most men have gone through a traumatic event, or eventually they will. Like they're going to lose a parent, or they're going to go through a divorce, or they're going to lose a job, um, and that's the power, is learning how to process that trauma. Because if you don't, it leads to addiction, it leads to male violence, it leads to suicide. All the things you're seeing play out in the world right now. Unfortunately, most of addictions in our culture, I mean, there are women that get addicted, but I think the numbers are like men are 3 times more likely to get addicted, 3 times more likely to get involved in like violent crimes. You're seeing all these kids shoot, young kids go into these schools and shoot people. It's because they never were really taught how to feel and just process that emotion. So all they know how to do is be angry. So my answer to you, every man out there really needs to learn how to feel and process emotions, or they're going to just go down a path of addiction, which can lead to depression, can lead to suicide, it can lead to male violence, all sorts of things. The divorce rates are getting higher. So we're at a crossroads right now where I think men have to redefine that image of how to be a man. And this suck it up and don't cry. And I'm not saying we're going to take your guns away or take your glass of scotch away at night. All I'm saying is learn how to feel. It's so imperative right now for our culture. And I really think we're at a crossroads where men are realizing what's been going on for the last 34 years. It doesn't work.
Oh, this is fantastic. So where do they start? How do they start to learn to feel if they're not already in touch with their emotions?
I think it takes a lot of courage. I mean, it sounds like a simple thing to check in and sit with yourself, but when you sit with yourself, I remember the first time that I did, all sorts of stuff was going to come up. All the things that you've been pushing down. Like so many men push down their emotions with alcohol, with overwork, with sex addiction, pornography addiction, you name it. That's how, and television, like there's food, there's dozens of ways men and even women's for that matter. But since the show is on the Heart Warriors and the Man, that men have not learned how to deal with that emotion, and it's challenging. That's why it's so much easier to numb it down with these addictions. So to start, I think it takes a lot of courage, and men have to say, okay, look, this is not working anymore. I have to make a change. If I want to make a change, I have to do the work and admit to themselves that perhaps they do have an addiction that they want to get rid of. It takes honesty and courage. That's the first step. And then maybe finding a mentor or a coach or an energy healer, someone that they can work with and guide them through the process of how to really let go of some of those emotions that chances are most men out there are suppressing. I mean, that I'd say, I hate to use statistics, but I'd say 50 to 80% of men push their stuff down with addiction today.
Wow, that's a huge number. And it's just good to
Yeah.
have these conversations, awareness of the men who have been through it. This is why the aim of this platform is for men to speak to other men and, through their own stories and experience. Now, I've heard that anger is unprocessed grief. Would you agree with that?
Um, I think I've heard angers actually, yeah, as well. I heard a lot of anxieties on unprocessed grief, but I would say, yeah, most emotions that are suppressed, I think, turn to anger because what happens is if you're pushing, 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 um, the only thing the body and the brain knows how to do is get angry because that's like the default mechanism of a man, and that's what comes at them in our social conditioning. Like if you look at sports, you look at television and movies, it's about someone does something to you and you get angry, you shoot them or you punch them out or you hit them in the head with a bottle. Like that's the male conditioning program. So that's how they're taught that, oh, it's okay to get angry, but it's not okay to cry, or it's not okay to be sad, or it's not okay to be like joyous and happy. Like they're just taught, oh, someone did that, boom, punch them out, or boom, shoot them. You know what I mean? It's almost like a conditioned response that men have. So that's all they really know.
This is a great insight because, yeah, when you think about it, anger is one of the only acceptable emotions that men are allowed to have, exactly as you said, right?
Yeah. Oh, for
Wow.
sure. I mean, you think back in school, our parents or teachers, if you start laughing too much, oh, shut up, stop that. If you're joyous, oh, be quiet. Or if you're crying, oh, stop that crying. Here's a cookie. I remember I was on a plane and there was a small little girl in the front seat on the airplane, and she was crying. It was clear that she was having some earaches from the takeoff of the plane, and she was physically in discomfort. And the mother's yelling at her to shut up, stop crying. And that's kind of like you said, we're not given permission to cry, to be happy, to laugh, to jump up and down. It's always like behave and put your shoulders up and chin up and walk straight. And so anger is all men could do, or they're just, so they're told to do this, do that, and then they just get angry. That's like a default mechanism almost.
Hmm. Very interesting. And just as I said, great to just have this awareness about. Thank you for that, David. Let's go
Oh, you're
into
welcome.
your adulthood now. What would you describe as your rock bottom moment?
Rock bottom moment. So in my 30s, mid 30s, I came back from a trade show, and I was pushing my emotions down through work, through alcohol. I was engaged at the time, but prior to the engagement, I was going through not sort of relationships, but not in it to win it, like 3 years and then move on. I was almost addicted to that feeling of falling in love. So I was using that work, alcohol, to push down that grief in my mid 30s. And I came home from a trade show, and I looked at my now wife, who was then my fiance, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I was like, physically, my body was burnt out. It was like someone, it was like the universe just said, no, you're not doing this anymore. It's time for you to make a change. And I came home from this trade show, and at the time I was representing 10 companies from all over the world. I owned a sales agency business, and I was traveling almost every week, either at a sales meeting or visiting customers. And I said to my fiance, I'm done. And on the Monday morning, I Googled wellness retreat, and I found Deepak Chopra Center in Southern California. And literally 5 days later, I was on an airplane on my way to San Diego, and I immersed myself. They had a program called Perfect Health, where I studied Ayurvedic medicine, yoga, meditation. I was there for 10 days, and there was people there from all over the world that had, cancers and all sorts of things. I was fairly healthy. I was just physically burnt out. And the first day they taught me to meditate, I was like, wow. I was like, it felt so good just to sit and be, and not, always be on the move. And 10 days later, my wife picked me up at the airport. She didn't recognize me. I lost so much emotional weight that I was carrying. And ever since that day, I was hooked on that feeling of calm and inner peace. And then I just went down this path of healing and found different energy healers. I studied Qigong. I really studied Ayurvedic. I ended up in India for a couple of years. I got really into breath work. So my mid 30s is when I hit that place of, I can't do this anymore. And I started to process some of those emotions. And they weren't all there. They started to come out more in my 40s, but it was a good starting point to begin to heal.
Yeah, this is so good. And it sounds like you heard the message before you got run over by a bus, so to speak, as to, you got so physical illnesses and things, you heard the message and you heeded it and started on your healing journey.
Yeah, that would be the best way to describe it, being run over by a bus.
Because a lot of people maybe ignore the first message and they soldier on. I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got to pay for the kids' schooling, blah, 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 whatever the reason. They soldier on and they ignore the message and they ignore the feeling of burnout until something happens to them physically where they just can't, keep on going.
Yeah, I look back, I'm grateful. And I think a lot of it is fear. I mean, at the time I had a thriving business, so it was even hard for me to give that up. So for a lot of men, they get those sort of golden handcuffs on, and they think about again, we're conditioned as men to be the provider and think about the future. And we, no, not realizing that, the universe is abundant. If you can tap into that present moment awareness, everything works out. You can make a shift in your career. It at the time it seems very difficult, but everything will work out for the better. And I think I watch biographies now of people that have gone down similar roads, and a lot of them die. Like you said, they don't make the change. A lot of them turn from like alcohol, and then it turns into like cocaine, and then it turns into opioids, because they're working and they're still partying, and they don't make it. So I think once you get some sort of awareness, or you hear someone even like me and you talking, maybe that's a signal to say, hey, it's time to make a shift, and not to be fearful. Know that what you're going to do is all going to work out. But I'm actually in the middle of writing a blog post right now, and I'm saying, as an entrepreneur and a businessman, your health is your best investment. It's the best thing you can spend your money on. And most men don't. They spend money on houses and cars and second houses, and and this and that. And um, what's the point of having all that stuff if you're not healthy?
This is great because this is like the question of what is true wealth. And, I love this conversation as internal wealth as opposed to external wealth. Can you please speak to men who are in the position where they know they need to change something, but they have this, they're too entangled in their businesses, their financial assets, their payments, their commitments, they're wanting to provide for the family. How does a man navigate that field?
One of my buddies has a saying, less is more. And even in my own life, like I'm speaking to myself, sometimes I'm the shoemaker with the worst shoes, because we're all taught by these advertisers that unless you have this, brand new car, you're not good enough, or you need the perfect wife, or the bigger house. And so we're always sort of looking forward for more. And I think the message for me and for most men, and I'm still guilty of this as myself, and I'm an ambitious guy, but real joy as I'm getting older, and real inner peace, it's not out there. It's not something you buy. It's in here. It's on the inside. And learning that lesson, sometimes it's not an easy thing to learn for all of us, I think, right now. But when you think about it, like I said before, what's the point of having all that money? Because most people that are materially in that three-dimensional world of buying more, usually they're working too hard and their health is suffering.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And often, how much is it for men meeting the expectations of others? Like maybe their parents or their wives, their families. And at what point do you step back and take control and, say, well, hey, I know you expect such and such and such and such, but I have to take care of me now.
Yeah, I think that's one of the harder challenges for men is, like you said, the family comes first, and then you've got peer pressure from parents, then you've got friends, and then you've got children to take care of, and sports and all this. And sometimes the self love, the man is at the bottom of that pile, and that's not a good way to be. I think it takes really, you got to be um, you got to stand your ground as a man and be courageous and say, look, I need to take care of myself, or else I'm no good to the family. I'm no good as a friend. I'm no good as an employee or a business owner to my customers. Eventually, all men start to realize, I think, at some point, that that's the pyramid it should be, is the health at the top. And unfortunately, men aren't so good at that self-love. And I think it's another paradigm that's got to shift, or else, our society is not going to be, we're just not in a healthy place as men right now.
Yeah. And you spoke a lot about addictions. So, what would you say was your main addiction when you were in that chaotic lifestyle of trying to juggle everything?
Never sitting still. Like like that. I mentioned that first time I meditated, it was like such a beautiful experience because I was running around from, sales meeting to sales meeting to sales conference to, to party to, I was in a lot of long distance relationships. So I was never just being, I was always doing. And then, on the weekends it led to, it was binge drinking. Um, so I guess not taking enough time sitting still, working too hard, getting involved in long distance relationships that I was not really in it for the long run, I suppose. And then the alcohol; those would be the three things that I use in terms of numbing my suppressed feelings.
Mm. I'm interested in what you said earlier. You're addicted to the feeling of falling in love. How does that play out for a man?
I think when you first get involved in a relationship, it's always that sort of excitement. It's like, everything's new. You're on your first vacation together, you're going on your first date, your first times you make love, first everything's sort of new, and it's almost that, what do they call it, the honeymoon stage. And I think, like, chemically in our brains, even, I think that first initial year or two of a relationship, especially if it's a long distance, because you're not seeing the person every day, you're seeing them every week or every 2 weeks. So it's almost like a constant high. It's like you see them, it's like, oh wow, I haven't seen you in a week, and the sex is great, and you're not fighting. It's just it's an excitement, and it's like a high almost.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Okay. Was it, did you, when you made the choice then to,
Longer.
oh, sorry, you cut out for a bit. Were you finished?
Yeah, sorry, I finished. Yeah.
You've
Did
just,
you get that?
oh, I didn't get the last bit. Could you repeat the
Oh, I was
last
just
bit?
saying, yeah. I think when you're in that long distance relationship, that feeling of that newness of the relationship lasts a little bit longer than when you're, say, living with someone, for example.
Yeah, right. Do you think it was anything to do with, as you said, when the honeymoon phase weans out and you sort of left then with people showing their true colors, and then you've got a bit of work to do in relationships, and you've got to look at yourself as much as you look at the other person. Do you think it had anything to do with avoiding the hard work of relationships?
I think you're right. I think, one of the best lessons in life is to get married and live with someone and work through, because most of the time when you're in a relationship, that person's going to mirror the stuff that you don't want to look at. So it's hard. You have to be in a place where you're ready to look at that stuff, and all the habits that you have are going to start rearing their ugly heads, and someone else is going to be looking at them and as a mirror to you. So yeah, it definitely takes work when you're with someone all the time. And I think that's why many marriages, a man will go from a marriage to another marriage and then say another one, and they'll point the finger at the woman. And the best way, I tell my friends, the best way to improve your marriage is to work on yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So what are David's top three tips for a healthy relationship?
Healthy relationship. First thing, again, is taking responsibility for your own stuff. Like, working on your own like, I guess, sort of that emotional balance, like learning how to become more present with the person you're being, which starts with being present with yourself. So the first tip, I would suppose, is that self discipline, to take the time to love yourself and work on yourself as a man. And that involves all the things we talked about earlier, like processing the emotions, and all sort of the embodiment practices that I teach is the first step, really taking time to work on yourself. The second is allowing the other person to work on themselves without sort of feeling, maybe not loved or left out, or that person's not, whatever. Allowing them space to learn and grow and work on themselves. Like, I look at my wife and she's allowed me space to go through my stuff, and I've allowed her space to go through her stuff. And the third tip is having that attitude that it's it's not 5 years old. Like, try to show up like you were when you first met. Always be sort of like in it for the long term. Like, I don't think I'll ever get divorced because it's not really in my vocabulary. Like, I'm going to work on this, and working on the relationship by being present all the time, and that communication, which goes along with communication as well.
Yeah, so good. I love that. Thank you. Um, I want to go back to meditation, seeing it plays such a huge role in your life. There's a lot of men who have said, "Oh yeah, I've tried to meditate. It's not for me." What do you say to those men?
Well, I hear that a lot. I hear that the excuse is I can't meditate.
Yeah.
They say, "Oh, I have too many thoughts." It's well, that's what you're supposed to have thoughts. The practice is to come back to non-thought, and you have a thought, you come back to non-thought, you come back to that awareness. I think most men that say they can't meditate I think it's a lot of fear. They don't want to sit and be with themselves.
Hmm.
And I think you have to, if you want, like I said before, you asked me, if you really want to make change in your life, you have to take responsibility for the addiction, for some of the pain you have. And the first step to me is sitting down and being, and which is, as you know, is part of meditation.
Yeah. So there's lots of different ways to meditate, and some people say, they can do a walking meditation. Some people need to sit still in the silence. Some people have guided meditations. What's your routine? What will you say to, first of all, what's your routine? And then if there's any other options that how do you say to men how to meditate in general?
My advice to every man is the RPM method, which is rise, P, meditate. The And the reason for that, if you get up and you check your phone or you go down and have a cup of coffee or something to eat, chances are the meditation will not happen. So, first thing in the morning, I tell my guys, wake up, find a quiet place in your house, designate an area in your home where the kids can't get at you, or your dog, or anybody, or the phone. No phones. Don't turn on your phone first thing in the morning. Spend at least 20 to 60 minutes in silence and ask yourself some of the soul questions, like who am I, like we talked about. What do I want? What is my purpose? What am I grateful for? What am I holding on to that's no longer serving me? Some deep soul questions is a good start. Maybe some gentle breath work, like just belly breath, breathing in through your nose and filling your belly out, and then exhaling through your mouth, making sure your exhale matches the inhale, and just really starting to ground down. And then the easiest meditation, there's a few different types. I mean, as you're probably aware, there's the follow your breath. You can pretend you're like an eagle looking down at yourself. The one I think is the best for beginners is a mantra meditation, which is the popular transcendental meditation, which most of the famous people all do. The Beatles did. That's the easiest because it's an easy way to come back from a thought into a mantra. So you asked my routine. That's what I do first thing in the morning. I do walk the talk, or walk the walk. I wake up and meditate every day. I rarely miss. Sometimes when I'm on vacation, but it's the best way for me to start the day with more energy, more focus, more clarity. And of course, at the end of the meditation, like I talked about, I check in and I ask myself, how am I feeling? If I'm sad, I'll cry. If I'm happy, I might celebrate. If I'm angry, I might punch a pillow. But if I do that every day, my day starts out way more like, I can't even explain, just much more clarity.
So good. Um, do you think that did you so how long have you been meditating for now? How many years?
Um, 18 years.
Wow. Do you think it helped at all with your creativity?
Oh, most definitely.
Mm.
Probably one of the best things that brings out creativity is meditation. There's that saying, prayer is asking, meditation is receiving. Um, when I was in California the first time, when I gave up all the businesses that I was working with, I didn't know what I was going to do. There was some fear there, but the answers came to me when I was meditating. Everywhere I looked, there was eco this, eco that. So I started an eco packaging business when I came home. So that the answer to me what to do with my career came during meditation. I can't tell you, Gemma, how many countless answers I've gotten during meditation over the years. It's like literally hundreds. It's the best way for me to get creative. Like, what am I going to create next? As soon as I meditate, it just falls in my lap. Maybe not that day, but shortly thereafter.
This is so good. And I love this because I have my journey with meditation as well and creation. What do you think gives us those answers in meditation? What are we connecting with?
I think well, first off, we're quietening our mind, right? Because when our mind's going all the time, it's we're getting influenced by what we see, what we hear, that perception, all the things coming at us, which is nowadays is very fast, a lot of messaging, very very quick. When you meditate, you calm. I mean, there's the brain waves, right? I think we go into the theta state where the brain waves start to really slow down. And when that happens, I think what you're tapping into that, first off, your body starts to calm down. And I think a lot of intelligence they're doing studies at the Heart Math Institute. A lot of intelligence is in our heart. And I think when we calm our brains down, we tap into the heart. And when we tap into the heart, I think that's when we tap into that whole unity consciousness and awareness of we can be whatever we want. We can co-create anything we want to do.
Yes, so good. All right, so let's bring the heart into this. Um, what function does the heart have in, well, the healing journey and, the awake warrior, the heart warrior? How do you relate to the heart as a man?
I did some work with a woman years ago. She used to do Reiki. I saw her for massage, and then she started turning into Reiki. And I remember her telling me I have a lot of blockages around my heart. And she said what that is it's basically protection. Like as men, or even as women, if we have any trauma in our lives, and which we both talked about, we all do. That usually manifests as a block around the heart. And it takes work to remove those blocks. Like it took me many years, years of meditation, years of working with energy healers. But once you start to remove those blocks, I think you become a catalyst for love. And when you're a catalyst for love, you're present. You have more abundance. Your relationships start to flourish. Your whole life starts to transform. But it takes work to get into that heart. Most of us men, to avoid that, we stay in our heads. So we're good at solving problems. We're intelligent. We make lots of money. We create lots of products, and but when you really think about the true intelligence of life, which is joy and love and peace and happiness, it's stored in the heart. So to get to those higher dimensional, 5-dimensional emotions, that's where we need to go. And it's challenging though, because you have to look at some of that trauma and the pain and the stress that we all carry in our bodies, right?
Yeah, they're like, I relate it to like bricks around the heart, and then you go
Yeah.
chip away
Yeah.
and demolish that one, that one, that one until, you just like open source. Um, so how would you define love, as in now as a very aware man in the heart energies, as opposed to what you maybe thought love was 20 years ago?
20 years ago, it was an infatuation. Like I told you about the love addiction. It was about the honeymoon period, and the great sex, and never fighting, and always really just having almost always like a vacation. And now I look at love as more, it's more of a, it's not, it's still a physical attraction, but it's more of a heart to heart feeling. Like I feel very connected to my wife right now. I feel like, um, I don't know, I just feel this huge amount of energy from my heart that connects with her versus used to be, say, my brain and my eyes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take it further as you referred to it, and I agree with a 5D frequency. Let's take it further than intimate relationships. How does a man go out into the world with this energy of love and open heart?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the midst of that right now. It can be challenging because not everybody's at that same level of frequency, as you know. And but what I'm finding, Gemma, is that wherever you are, you start to vibrate in similar frequencies with others, and I think you start to attract people like yourself without even really knowing it. It just starts to. I think the people come into your life. It's almost like a puzzle. Like the pieces of the puzzle just start to fall into place. Um, I don't think that's the hard part. I think the hard part is actually doing the work and getting there. Going out into the world, I think that becomes easier. I think once you learn how to navigate some of the stresses and become very good at anchoring and becoming present, once you open the heart, I think that's the next step. Which I'm going through right now. I'm not perfect. I still sometimes feel anxious with all the crazy energies out there because I am so open. But I'm learning to navigate that feeling of being um, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, I guess, is a good way to explain it. So I think for most men, that should be sort of a secondary type um, thought, or even not even really something to concern yourself with. I think the most important thing is to keep doing the inner work and keep opening the heart and keep learning to be more present and more embodied versus that constant thought, which I'm still going through myself. Like I went through a week last week where my thoughts were just going and going and going. It was challenging for me to get back into my body, but I have these practices and these tools that help me get into the body, that I'm really grateful that I have.
Yeah, and I'm interested to ask, because you did mention levels of anxiety. On the whole, do you find now, as you're progressing in your healing journey and obviously rising in vibration, that fear diminishes? Like, we know we're at a point where, because of a high frequency, we can only attract further high frequency people, circumstances, situations into our field. So fear and anxiety diminish because we're full faith with the quantum field.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it any better. I think that that is so true, Gemma. Like, I mean, there's times where I still feel some anxiety, but if I look back versus say 5, 7, 8 years ago, it's starting to really lose its grip on my life. And I think it's having more presence because a lot of anxiety is just fear, like fear of the future, or fear that something's going to happen like it did in the past, like a pattern or something. So I think when you start to become more present and you have that openness and love and connection, you have much less fear. Like you described, your frequencies are higher. All the things start, the universe starts sending the right people in the right circumstances and the right situations into your life, and that starts to dissipate.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great motive for people, for us to continue on the journey, right?
Yeah.
David, I met you, I was reading through on your website, and you mentioned, okay, so unleash creativity, productivity, and clarity to help you win in life by using powerful, time-tested techniques for the modern working warrior. Time-tested techniques. I'm presuming one of those is meditation.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
and yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering now, we can talk to men about what are the other techniques?
You know, movement is really important, I think. Like non-linear movement, like a lot of men, we move like we run and we jog and a lot of it's movements. Non-linear movements are things like the qigong, like that I teach, and maybe even yoga. Some men like yoga. I prefer the qigong or tai chi. I think movements that and exercises that help, again, get into that body more, like that embodiment where you can move but also breathe and be present at the same time. A lot of activities that men exercises, like it's team sports, and it's like, you're with a bunch of guys and then you have a few drinks after, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think the stuff that's really helped me is the stuff that I do alone, and where I'm in nature and I'm really connecting to, the lake and the earth and the trees and the sun and the air, and I can really bring in all those elements into my body, because all those elements are what help bring us into balance. If you look at Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, all their healing modalities are based on elements. So if you can do things outside, if Qigong's not thing, or yoga, even spending time in the woods alone, like things that help, um, make you become more sort of aware, like self-awareness. It doesn't have to be all about sitting in a chair and meditating. I mean, that's great, but walking through the woods or doing stuff down by the lake, I think are just as powerful.
Yeah, this is great. First time I've heard, I mean, we've spoken a lot about Qigong and, all martial arts and all, what you describe as non-linear sports and movements. But the first time I've heard that definition of non-linear, and it makes complete sense because, instead of just running in one direction, we're actually grounding and present and feeling the space around us and, bringing it into our body. I love that.
Yeah, I was coaching a young pilot, a few months back, and he likes to go to the gym, and we did a qigong session. Now he's hooked on qigong, and he told me, he said, David, he said, I've done a lot of workouts. He said, this qigong is one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And I remember the first time my teacher, he had me do the same thing. It was like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, wax on all day, and he'd have me do the same movement, like moving my hands up. It's called pulling down the heavens. And for the first 3 months, every hour we'd meet once a week, he'd say again, 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 again. And I'd come home and I'd say to my wife, I'd say, I don't know, this guy's making me do the same thing every single day. Like, what the heck? I don't know if I'm getting something from this, but he was teaching me how to move my body and synchronizing my movement with my breath. Because most people, if you get them to do a movement, you'll find they're not breathing, they're just moving. So he waited till I could move my breath with my body, because most of the times, for me anyway, I had a lot of energy blocks at that time. So to move my breath with my body, you it shows you where you need to heal and move that energy. Like a lot of qigong is just moving chi up the main meridian lines. So anyway, this back to that story. This guy was like, "Wow, this is the most challenging thing I've ever done in my entire life." And it's not like a, you're not lifting 400 pounds, you're not like running a marathon, but you have to sit and get out of your head because you have to again move your breath with your body. So it's a very powerful modality, and it shows you where you need to do some work. At least it did for me, and even for this guy.
Yeah, it is powerful because I imagine when the majority of men think of physical, why they might be motivated to do physical activity. It's one, to look good, and also for general health, and well-being. But as you said, it's this energetic, this connection to breath, this whole embodiment of an awareness, which is so powerful, I think, for men as an embodiment tool to bring them into that sense of presence and the heart space.
Yeah, that's a really good definition. You couldn't have said it better. And there's nothing wrong with going to a gym and doing weights. I think like for me, I have a balance. Like some days I do like to go for a bike ride or have a swim or go for a run, but I still come back to that practice at least 3 or 4 days a week because it shows me, it gets me out of my head. Like that I was telling you like a couple of weeks ago, the thoughts were going, and I was really getting creative, and I'm excited about my new business because I'm getting such good feedback, like stuff that I'm putting out there. People are saying, "Wow, this is the time." And I did a 7-minute video documentary, and I had like 75 positive comments. A local magazine interviewed me, and they did a beautiful story. And all these people were like, "Man, this is amazing." So my brain was just going and going and going. I had to go down to the lake and do this qigong, and it took me a good 15 minutes to get my movement to get into my body. But that's how powerful it is. It can get you from a place of thought and maybe sort of too much excitement, or whatever, too much emotion of any kind. It can get you into your body, and that is can be very, very therapeutic and very, very healing no matter what you're going through.
Yeah. Is it because it's balancing then the head and the heart? As you said, most men are in this mental space, but you're bringing it back down into balancing and integrating it with the heart energy. Is that what brings peace and well-being to men?
Yeah, I think anything that gets us out of our head into our bodies, because the heart is like the it's not, I mean, the energy center is in the belly button. They call it the danchan in martial arts, but the heart is still involved because as soon as you get out of your head, you become into your body. So the heart automatically gets involved. And then when you start moving and you're focusing on your breath and your movement, that's really the embodiment that really starts to get us into that flow of breath and movement and presence. And when you're present, that's when you get the energy, the chi or the prana, whatever you want to call it. That's when you really can be powerful in your life. And the training of doing this every single day or every other day, you start to bring it off the practice, and you become present, in just about everything that you do. And that's when you flourish in life, and you have abundance and joy and peace and happiness in your work and your relationships and your personal health, and all the things start to work. But to get there, again, it's not like a switch you can turn on. I think, as I said at the beginning of the interview, you have to do the work and take time to love yourself and put yourself before all those other things. Because again, without you and your health, what's the point, right?
Sure. Yeah. And let's go back to what you said about the belly button. Did you call it the psionic center?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
because
the
it's not the first time I've heard this. Tell me about that. Tell me about the power of that area of the body.
yeah, I think they call it, like in martial arts, they call it the dantian, like the belly button area. And qigong, they call it like the energy center. And I think it's what it means is that's where a lot of like our core is where we hold a lot of the energy. I mean, when you think about it, when you're born, that's where you're connected to your mother, right? Through an umbilical cord. So I think energetically, that's what you feel when you first enter the world. You got that connection to your belly button. And I think when you think about it, when you breathe, if you learn how to breathe deeply, um, you start to feel more present, more calm, and more energetic when you access that belly button or the belly area.
Mm.
Most of the time we're breathing up here, and a lot of times people get sick, or they're tired, or they're depressed, or they're lethargic. I think that's because we're not breathing deeply into that energy center, and That's what a lot of qigong does. It moves the breath from the bottom of the earth up the legs, up the back, up all the chakras and the energy centers or whatever you want to call them, and then back down. So you're moving energy flow all the way up the main meridians of the line, up the back, up the base chakra, up the middle chakra, up the up the heart chakra, up the throat and the third eye. You're moving all that energy up, and then you're moving it back down, and that's where you really start to feel energetic, and you're tapping into that energy source of the belly button or the dantian.
Fascinating. So you're in Canada. I mean, one thing for us in Australia to go out and be what you described the woods, we'd say the bush here or the forest. But what do you do in winter?
You dress warm. and I mean, I get away as often as I possibly can.
Oh, that's
Like
good.
like somewhere I like beaches, so in the winter I always get away to the Caribbean for a couple weeks. Um, I'm trying to plan a trip the next winter to tour like Southern California, and so you try and January, February, March is challenging in Canada. Like a lot of people, we don't see a lot of sunshine. It's freezing cold, but if you dress for it and it's a lot of its attitude, you can get through it.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Love it. Okay, so we've got meditation, we've got movement. Anything else of those time-tested techniques?
I talked about breath work.
Okay, can we expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's two types of breath works. There's a pranayama breath work, which is really calm breathing. The easiest one for men that I show is the belly breathing. I think we talked about it earlier. It's a long inhale in through your nose, filling up your belly, and then a long exhale out through your mouth, 5 or 10 minutes a day. It's a great place to start. Holotropic, you need more of a coach or a mentor to guide you through that. That's a little more aggressive breath work. Um, that's when you can release some emotions though. If you're taught correctly, you can release some of the things you might have been holding on to. So I think those breath work is really, really, really important. And then like we talked about checking in with your emotions like that. The processing the emotions I think is important. Like learning how to look inside and check in how you're feeling is a daily practice.
Mhm.
Another thing that's good for men that they can be sort of reluctant to do is writing down how they're feeling. So like journaling, like I think they did a study at Harvard and they showed if you write down 3 things you're grateful for a day, their depression starts to lift naturally. So that's a really good practice. And then learning just to be more mindful, like throughout the day, like being more present. Like a practice I have right now, because I'm that sort of achieving creativity, personality, like a man, like us all, like thinking a lot. I just try and check in and say, okay, you don't need to think so much. Like just enjoy that tree coming at you, or the sun out, or the cloud, or or whatever. Like try and embody more present moment awareness versus always thinking about what am I going to do next, and I got to do this, I got to do that, and that's work for me. But if you learn how to, if you start to do all these other practices, it's almost like a domino effect. They all start to improve, and you start to, you move through your day more like that, like more present.
Yeah, and I love this conversation because for me personally, it's like, time is dissolving and it is just all about this present moment. I mean, maybe as a woman more, sort of, I guess, grounded in emotions and the heart energy, I can let go of the head and be in that space. But do you think it'd be more difficult for a man to let go of that, where I've got to be, what I've got to do, sort of, and just keep coming back into the present moment?
Yeah, it is difficult for sure. I mean, even for me, like, and I've been doing this a long time. It's constant work.
Mm.
Like it's a practice. Like even 9 to 5. Like I have my moments. I have days when I'm very present, and other days I'm like, oh man, I'm just like way over here or way back. Like it takes time and it takes practice, you have to. Someone said to me the other day, he's a Buddhist. He's a TM teacher and he's a Buddhist psychotherapist. His office is a couple doors down from mine. He's become a close friend, and he told me, he said you have to embrace who you are. Like a lot of our society conditions us. Like if we have something wrong with us, like say I don't know, I'll give you an example. Maybe we're an introvert and we don't talk a whole lot. We're meant, you know, we're told, well, that's bad. You need to be more of this, more of that. And he's like, you need to celebrate who we are,
Mm.
like, and it was a good lesson for me because someone had told me the other day, I think, that I was too, that I was too like, maybe too energetic, like too, too like thinking a little bit too much, like, making a joke about that. Like, he's like, oh, your brain's like, zzz, it's like, it's always going like, that was where I was a couple weeks ago. And he said to me, like, celebrate that. Like, that those type of people can be the most creative and the most productive in the world. And, I was kind of like beating myself up. I'm like, why am I like that? Why is my brain just going? And he's like, embrace who you are.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. That's yeah, really powerful. David, we've got about half an hour left. I always like to open up the conversation because each man is so unique with his experience and teachings and awareness. What do you think needs to be brought into this conversation around man masculinity, the healing journey?
Oh, man. Well, one of the main things I think is for men to, we already talked about this a little earlier, but for men to, um, not be so ashamed of showing their emotions. I think that's one of the biggest ones. Like, that's where I think we need to make a shift in our society. And, it's the masculine image. It doesn't work anymore. I can get through anything. Now, I know in my own life, like, that's what led me to my own. You talked about my sort of rock bottom or healing crisis, whatever you want to call it. That's what it was caused from. It was caused from me pushing down grief. And I think if you look at a lot of, um, that's a big one. Like, if you look at most of the other things stem from that. Like, you look at addiction, you look at divorce, you look at, suicide, suicide, look at male violence. Most of it is, you go to the doctor and they'll give someone a pill or they'll say, take this, or, a lot of the healing, um, and at least in the West, it's based on, sort of putting a band-aid on something. And I think a lot of these things that we're talking about in society, like addiction, and, there's addiction counselors, there's addiction this and addiction that, and all these different, healing modalities for these symptoms. But I think we need to really look at the root cause. And in my view, I think a lot of it is that suppressed emotion.
Mm.
So that's the big one, and that's the one that a lot of men are not really comfortable talking about still.
Yeah, because you do men's retreats, right?
I'm just starting. Yeah, I'm fairly new at this, but yeah, that's the goal. I started with online courses, then retreats, and then private coaching.
Yeah, okay. So what would you say, the men that are coming to you, what's the biggest issue at the moment that men are dealing with?
I think, give you an example. So let's say someone's drinking too much alcohol, and you'll bring it up like, hey, so and so quit drinking because they had, say, diabetes or something, or high blood pressure or whatever. A lot of the times they want to change the subject. Like, they don't want to take sort of responsibility for where they are. um, and because it's not the addiction, it's not the alcohol, or it's not the porn, or it's not the sex, or it's not the marijuana. It's usually the pain and the trauma.
Mm.
So, that is where I think so many times they don't want to talk about the addiction. It's not really they don't want to talk about that they're drinking too much. It's they don't want to get again back to that root cause of healing that trauma or the emotions or the stress that's carried in the body. Like most addictions, if you go back, that's where it stems from, right?
Right. So, if a man comes to you with addictions, alcohol, porn, whatever it is, um, what do you say to them are the first steps to get them out of that addiction?
It's funny you say that. I'm working on a 21-day challenge, that I'm going to put out there for men. And it's going to be 21 days, and it's going to be challenging. And one of the challenges is going to be, take a look in the mirror, and what are you addicted to? Is it porn? Is it alcohol? Is it sex? Is it marijuana? Is it whatever your thing is? Is it, and we've all had them or have them. I've had them. I'm not perfect. Like, I was addicted to, I told you, relationships, alcohol, work. What is that thing? Look in the mirror and ask yourself, what do you need to stop doing? and stop doing it for 21 days and see how you feel. So that's what I'm working on, a challenge for men, and that will be one of them. Write down all your addictions, and you might have one, you might have, sometimes one leads to two or three. I mean, for me, it was three. Um, I'm not shy or ashamed like I used to be to tell people what I went through, because I think when you start to share that, you become real and authentic, right? Like I could lie to you and say, "Oh, I was perfect. I had nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah." But no, I was drinking way too much. I was unhealthy. My body was breaking down. I was not in good relationships. I was going from one to one to one. I was working myself to the bone. That's what I'm going to ask men to do. Look in the mirror. What are you doing right now that you need to stop doing? Whether, again, could be anything. And I'm not judging them. I'm just, this is not about me saying you're wrong, or you're Republican, or you're Democrat, or you're black, or you're white, or you're whatever. No, this is about healing. This is what I'm about. I want to help men heal. That's it. And that's where this challenge is going to start. One of the challenges is going to be, what do you need to stop doing, and stop for 21 days. And then when you're done those 21 days, how are you feeling? And chances are they'll feel way better. Like I know in my own life, when I stopped drinking so much, I was a different guy.
Yeah. So if someone's got a lot of addictions, are you saying to drop them all for 21 days or to do one at a time? Because, yeah, you just replace one with another, wouldn't you? Is it like cold turkey,
Yeah,
let them all go?
yeah, you dropping them all.
Yeah, yeah, that
And
makes sense.
and when they start this 21-day challenge, because I'm not going to be there live, they have to print off something they're going to sign saying I'm taking a 21-day challenge, and they have to share that with someone in their life. Because I can't be there for. I want to spread this far and wide. I want this to, like, my mission is to help as many men. That's what I feel in my heart, and I think this is a great way to do it. So they can't be accountable to me, but someone that is in their life, whether it's their mom or their best friend or their child or their spouse, they're going to sign it, and the other person has to sign it. And I want that person to hold them accountable for these 21 days. It's not just going to be about letting go of addiction. It's going to be learning to breathe, and it's going to be learning to love yourself. It's going to be learning to do meditation, learning to do movement. Some of the things we talked about, even doing like a life history of your whole life. What happened from 0 to 7? What was painful? What was powerful? 7 to 14. Like, this is some of the stuff that they're going to go through. And I promise, if they do this 21-day challenge, their life will evolve and change for the better. And it's not going to be expensive. It's going to be under $100. It's going to be very accessible for everybody. I'm in the middle of writing the content. I'm about 99% through. I just have to film it, and I'm going to put it out there. And I'm convinced that this will change the trajectory of men's lives, because men are taking my course that I just did on burnout, stress, and anxiety. And the feedback I'm getting is just incredible. And that's why I'm so excited, because I think what I'm doing is so needed right now.
Oh, definitely. And I just want to thank you for that. And thank you for making it affordable, because, that's a big factor in a lot of men's lives at the moment, this allocating finances. And, any man dedicated to his journey can find $100 to dedicate 3 weeks. And also 3 weeks is very doable. You're not saying, look, let's commit to 3 years. I mean, anyone can commit to 3 weeks, right? It seems possible.
Yeah, and that's why, like you said, creativity and meditation. That's where this idea came. It's like, not everyone can afford private coaching. Like I have to charge for what I do. I can't give free coaching where I have to make a livelihood. But like you said, everyone can come up with $100. So it's going to be affordable. It's going to be accessible. There'll be short little video messages with a PDF to complete each day. It's going to be very easy to do, as long as you have an internet connection and a printer, and a friend or a family member that can hold you accountable. But I promise that if someone goes through this program and they don't notice a change in their life, I would gladly refund their money.
Yeah, it would be impossible, because just to drop your addictions, you're already going to get so many benefits. Wow, love it. I'm so excited about that. Thank you, David. What's happening in Canada with the men's movement? Like, what's the general direction of men awakening and coming into their healing journey? What do you see happening on the ground in Canada?
I think we're really at, like, what I'm doing is sort of, it feels like a grassroots movement. Like, it feels like it's at the right at the beginning, but it feels like it's ripe for, like, now. Like, it feels like all these years have been sort of maybe leading up to in different ways. And I feel like right now is the time where people are like, hey, something's got to change here. That's the feedback I'm getting. And I think people are really ready for it, which is great because, sometimes things happen. Um, I remember maybe 15 years ago when a lot of women were entering the workforce, or 20 years ago, and a lot of people would say, you call them the B word, like, you shouldn't be doing that. There was sort of like a kickback. And I think right now, I don't think there's going to be a kickback on this, because I think what's happening is it's just broken. We're seeing, society break down in so many different ways. So I think people are like, okay, hey, here's something that's like I said, it's not like dividing. It's not about the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and the woke and the unwoke, and the Christians versus the Muslims, and the Baptists against the Catholics. This is not what this is about. This is about healing men and getting them connected to their heart. That's what people are hungry for right now. I think we're tired of being, polarized and disconnected. I think we're all more alike than we realize. And I think this step that I'm introducing, these embodiment practices, and this beautiful platform, Gemma, that you're presenting to the world, Men with Heart and Heart War, I think it's just so powerful. And I think people are ready for this sort of information. I think it's needed. It's not decisive. We're not telling men to give up, everything. We're just asking them to look inside and connect with their heart.
Yeah. Do you think it's a matter of, well, what I would define as healthy masculine traits and wounded masculine traits? Do you think that men haven't been encouraged on the whole by the narrative or the agenda to embrace these healthy masculine traits that are needed to step us into, a new version of the world that is so needed, as you said?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the wounded, right? Like, the wounded is what we've sort of been playing through this discussion. The wounded is the addiction, right? For the most part, and then the embodied warrior, the healthy warrior, is healing that broken warrior that needs love and support and guidance and self love. Yeah, I think men are really starting to get encouraged to look at that, like what you're doing, like what I'm doing. I think it's opening up a world of men that are ready to embrace that change and move forward in a new sort of operating paradigm, as versus the old one again, which is not serving them anymore.
Yeah. Do you think it's as simple or as complex as men were slowly numbed to their power, and they gave their power over to the system, to governments, to protect and provide, and as long as you've got a job, you'll be able to do it, as long as you follow the laws and the systems and the narrative. But they didn't realize that slowly men were getting diminished in their natural healthy power source, and I would say that was the actual agenda.
I think that's a big component of that. I mean, governments love to, that saying, divide and conquer is one of them. And like you said, taking away their power, and like we're witnessing a little bit of demasculinity right now in our culture. Like, I'm not saying, when I'm saying men to tap into their emotions, but there's still a masculine component to being a man. I think there's a bit of confusion right now where it's like, no, you have to cry, and you have to be like this feminine man. No, you have to cry, but you still have to be a masculine man. Like, I feel like, my wife always says I embody that, because I was a hockey player, and it was like, I'm tough, yeah, and I'm a man, and I can go through a wall, and I'll fight for my family, and I'll provide, and I'll stand up to the government, all the BS that they've done for the last 3 years, and I won't be told what to do. But on the other token, I'll sit down and check in with my emotions, and I'll cry if I have to. I'm not saying cry and back down to all this government, autocratic BS that we've all faced. I'm saying, no, stand up to this stuff, be a man, fight for your rights, fight for your freedom, fight for your freedom of choice, like like Canadians did. But also, yeah, check in with yourself and embrace that feminine side. So I think there's a little confusion right now, and I think men are realizing that, again, what I'm saying, don't give up your gun, don't give up your glass of scotch if you want that. I'm just saying, don't be addicted. Don't suppress those emotions, check in and deal with your emotions, but still stand up and be a man and be powerful and, protect your family and be a great husband and be a great father, be a great provider, do all those things that makes up a man. But don't forget there's a feminine side that you have to balance.
So good. Great description. I love that. Thank you, David. What would you say is your highest value as a man?
My highest value as a man, I think just like integrity, like being, treating others as I want to be treated, um, is huge. I mean, imagine and love, like loving everybody, not like everybody's different. I've found I'm growing as I mature. Like used to be a little bit judgmental, like they're this and they're that. And it's like, you know what? We're all different. Like, who cares? Like love everybody. So for me, if you can embrace that non-judgment and acceptance of everyone, let them be who they are. If they want to go to church, go to church. If they want to, you know, whatever their thing is, if they want to wear, funny clothes or bright clothes or tattoos, the judgment part of me is lessening, and it's more acceptance and more love. And then again, why I want to treat people like the way I want to be treated. And if we all did that, we would have like no problems in this world.
So true, so true. What does freedom mean to you? I mean, you mentioned, the lockdowns in Canada, the past couple of years, and obviously impacted you and others. Did that give you a sense of working through what does freedom actually mean? Is it a physical thing? Is it a mental thing? How do you navigate that space?
Well, that's a tough one. Like being in Canada, we were one of the strictest countries in the world. And I disagree with, and this is very controversial, but I believe in medical autonomy. Like I'm a healthy guy, so if I don't want to pump myself with drugs and vaccines, I should not have that. I should not be made to do that. I think that was error number one, and I think people are starting to really get that because there's been so many injuries from these things that are starting to come out. And again, I hate talking about this because it's so controversial, but for me, it's about medical autonomy. Like I want to have freedom to be able to do what I want, like with my body. If I'm healthy, I'm not going to get sick. And I think if everybody had that attitude, the pharmaceutical industry would go to business because basically all they're doing is treating symptoms. And if we take our health into our own hands, we won't have any symptoms. And that's all these drugs do is they treat our symptoms. Most illnesses, as you're probably aware, we talked about, is usually from stress that we're holding in our body and trauma that we're holding in the body. And it's sad, but our medical system, at least in North America, there's no training in that. They're just trained to, I mean, don't get me wrong, the medical advancements are huge. And if you get in a car accident, they're great. But for the general stuff, the day-to-day stuff, I think we're over medicated and we're over vaccinated and we're all these things. And that to me is a huge part of the freedom that I felt that I lost when I was living in Canada for the last 3 years. And I think all different parts of the world felt that as well. So I really felt that I thought I lived in a free country, but not so.
Yeah, Australia and Canada were like, two of the hardest hit. And yeah, we thought we lived in a free country too. That's what I mean. It's like, wow, so, you start working through that. What is freedom? Is it, the physical limits they put on us, or is it the freedom we give ourselves mentally? I just find it an interesting topic, especially around men, where I would say the mission is the energy is more based on freedom, where the feminine energy is love, which comes together to get balanced and harmonized within. But that's how I see the masculine energy. Have you got anything else to say around freedom?
Yeah. Well, that was the main thing that I felt I lost for the last few years. And then having that awareness that I think we need to all sort of, I think it's a collective consciousness that I think is starting to spread. Like I have a lot of people in the arena that talk about, the third dimension to the fifth dimension. And that's what we're going through. I think it's from I don't know the right words, like from the Aquarius energy to the Pisces or something like that. But I think what's happening is, if you heard of that 100 monkey potato theory, one monkey, that story.
You know about the potato bit, but yeah, I
Yeah.
heard about the 100 monkeys.
Yeah, and one monkey figures out that when the potato is cleaner, it tastes better, and all the other islands started to do the same thing. And I think that's what's happening right now. I think there's a bit of an awakening going on right now.
Yeah.
And there's so much light shining down on us right now for whatever reason. And I think if you're ready to change and shift, I think it's a magical time. If you're not, I think it's a very challenging time because you're going to get sucked into some darkness and addiction and all those awful things. But I think freedom is a bit of an attitude, but it also, when someone says you can't leave your country, then that's obviously a lack of freedom, right? So, but I think we're in a shift right now. I think a lot of these governments are realizing that the power of the people is very strong, and they can try and control us all they want. But I think when we all come together as a collective energy, the truth starts to surface. As hard as they're trying to keep it down through the media, I mean, in Canada, it's kind of government-controlled media right now. But people are talking. They can't take that away. They can't take away that freedom of us expressing how we're doing, physically and health wise. So I think we're going. I think it's an exciting time to be alive.
Definitely. Where do you see? How do you see men being and the world in, say, 5-10 years?
I think in a much better place. Like, yeah.
I was going to sneeze.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah, maybe that's a good sign.
Yeah. Managed to avoid that on camera.
Yeah. No, so yeah, I think men are going to be in a much better place.
Yeah, that's
And in so many different ways, because I think what I'm doing is spreading. More and more men are becoming conscious. You're getting this beautiful platform you're sharing. Like if it touches one or two people, or even 10 or people, or 100 people, whatever, it's that it still starts to, when one energy changes, other energies change around them, right? So when I'm shifting, people around me are shifting, and when people are listening to this and they get one little bit of information, say, that helps them make a shift, then they start to shift, and then the people around them shift. I think it's almost like we're all energy, right, Gemma? And we're all energetically connected. So I think once a few people shift, it spreads, right?
Yeah, gathers momentum like a snowball, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up now, David. Please let us know where people can find you, and we'll drop all your links below in the description.
Oh, for sure. I'm sharing a lot of videos like this on success and wellness and health, and on Instagram, I think it's David Lawson _Awake Warrior. They're welcome to. That's my sort of main social platform that seems to be growing the most. And then I have a website, awakewarrior.com. I just released the first online course that's for stress, anxiety, and burnout. It's 6 video modules that they have for life. I think it's $367 US, but I put a lot of time and effort into this. It's a really powerful healing for any man that's going through anxiety, especially. I share a lot of stuff that I went through and how I came through the other side. It's filmed by an award-winning cinematographer, so the audio and the video quality is really good. Anyone that's going through anxiety, I promise you that can be a life-changing course, and that's at awakewarrior.com. And then I mentioned before, I'm in the middle of working on this 21-day challenge, which will be up on the website, I hope in a few months. And that'll be short videos, 21 days, where guys they can't afford my coaching. They can't afford to come to a retreat for travel or whatever. This will be very affordable, and it'll be a lot of the teachings, and it'll be a powerful way for them to shift and transform their life. And that'll be up soon, I hope. Just working on the final content, that I'll film that in the next month or two.
So good. And I always ask the men to wrap up with a final message to men. David, what have you got to say to men watching this who are maybe at that point where they're like, yeah, I've got to do something to change. My life's not going the way I want it to go. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I'd look in finding some help, like find some whether it's a therapist or a friend. Start with talking to somebody and share how you're feeling. That practice we talked about before, Gemma, is like just checking in and processing your emotions. Anybody can do that. Like, it's not, you don't need me or a coach or a mentor or a therapist. Just sit in the morning and take 5 minutes and do some deep breathing and just check in and ask yourself how you're feeling is a great start. And then I think once you're open to change, that saying, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. I think they might find teachers in their life that'll start falling under their lap. Like, people locally, whether it's a minister or a psychologist or like a men's coach like myself, or someone even like you, doing this, like the right people will fall into your lap when you're ready to make that change. So the first step is just honoring yourself and saying, hey, look, time to make a shift. Once you do that, I think everything will start to fall into place.
Yeah, that's so true. And it might be a book, it might be a YouTube, podcast. I mean, once you start watching things on YouTube, then you always get the recommendations, and, you can end up, getting exactly what you need to hear. That is so true. I think it's really important, as you said, to vocalize the commitment, whether it's to yourself or to someone else, as you said, even chatting to a friend, acknowledging, taking responsibility. Okay, life isn't going as I want it to. Who can change it? There's only me. Right?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's the best way to start. Yeah, you have to be willing to make a change.
Yeah.
You summed it up. Like, you have to be willing to look in the mirror and say, hey, this is not working anymore. And once you do that, like you said, a book or this podcast that someone's listening to right now, who knows, right? It just that checking with their emotions could change their whole life. And then, as I said, things start to progress, like as they did in my life. New teachers come in, you learn new mentalities. Like I learned qigong, and then it was meditation, then qigong, and then breath work, and then the processing the emotions. And I'm learning as time goes on. I'm doing a course right now working on moving energy up the chakras. Like, you constantly are working on yourself, and
Yeah.
and as men learn, take that first step, all the things will start to happen after that and flow, and their life will change.
So true. Well, David, I've loved this conversation. So much wisdom and insights and embodied experience. So thank you so much for joining us. And thanks everyone for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time on Heart Warriors.
Thank you, Gemma. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Very welcome. My pleasure. I'll just keep you on for a moment, please. Bye, everyone.